So hello and welcome. This is Erica Glessing, and you're joining me for the Erica Glessing Show, where you receive 8 minutes of daily inspiration from entrepreneurs and light bringers. And I like to travel all over the world. And my guest today is actually calling in from, I believe he's in Ohio. So there's a place we haven't been to very often on my show. Andrew Gardella is a Right Riches for You facilitator and a consciousness facilitator, and he just kind of squeaked out of Costa Rica. So welcome, Andrew.
Hi, it's great to be here. It's great to
I'm,
be back in the States too.
oh my goodness, and just to be in pure safety, it's a nice feeling. Kind of tell me a little bit of what went through your mind when you were saying part of the people couldn't maybe leave Costa Rica with some of the flights being changed in the world, the weather being strange. What was that like for you?
I really didn't notice that it was that, it was kind of after I booked everything, I realized oh, I almost didn't get out. But after everything, before that, I wasn't nervous. I was because they were oh, we're just going to rebook you on the 31st and it will be fine. And it was that didn't feel exactly right to me. It was just something was weird about it because I was going to
Ah,
fly out on the 29th originally, which is the
okay.
day I did fly out. But they're oh, we're just going to move you back. Houston's going to be fine in a couple of days because they canceled the one to Houston and the way Costa Rica works on United, they have 2 flights a day that go to Houston, and then they have 1 flight that goes to Newark. But those are the 3 flights United has. So I was kind of oh my gosh. And then I was there's something not right. So I called again, and I'm there's this other flight to Newark. Can you get me on this one? And they're I don't know. Well, I was well, can you book me on another airline then? Because I need to get home this day. And then they went to try and book me on another airline, and the guy came back and he said, actually, they had a seat available on the Newark one. So they put me on that. And I was they gave me a guaranteed seat. And I was okay, good, I'm set. So I got home, no problems.
That's nice. So tell me a little bit about money. Let's just talk about money. Let's talk about it people don't like to talk about money. They don't want to deal with money. My parents really never talked about money. So they were teachers and writers and free-flowing woo-woo people. They were very beautiful. They taught me a lot about writing.
But not so much about money.
Yeah, so what can we do if we're kind of wanting to shift that energy and have our lives be a little bit different than maybe our parents or grandparents?
For me, one of the things I realized is I just like having clarity in all areas of life. So I like to know what's going on. So just saying, oh, the money's going to be there, or the money's coming in, or I like to know, have a clarity with my finances. Okay, this is each month how much I pay out. And these are the things I know I'm going to pay each month. And that was one of the things that Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, recommended when you need to do right away is just to, get an idea of your monthly expenses, and then also add in all the other things you would the expenses of the life you would like to be having, and add that in. And then you start asking for that amount each month to show up. And you start looking at what else you can add to your life to create that amount.
So, what if every time you look at that amount, um, you're it never quite what if even in the looking at the clarity of it, you go into a tailspin?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been there. I've gone into the tailspin. I still did it because the important thing is if you're not going to be honest with yourself about the life you would really like to have and where you would like to live and how much it's going to cost, how are you going to get there? You have to know in some areas. And the other thing I really that helped me is when I looked at it is, well, I don't have to have all of this right now. I don't have to all of a sudden go from making this much this month to the next month having everything. It's something you're shooting for. So you can see each month, are you getting closer? Are you adding things? And it gets you starting looking for that, because if you want to be making $10,000 more each month, well, then you got to do something different. You got to start looking from a different point of view. And just for me, knowing that, okay, these are the things I would really like to have in my life. What am I going to have to do? And what am I going to have to create with my business to get them, to have them, and to
So,
have ease with it?
let me ask you another question.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just leap ahead
Mm-hmm.
and honor those people who are listening who have done this.
Mm-hmm.
And they've started leaping and they've started shifting And then maybe a tool for navigating that awkwardness when people think you're different or treat you different or don't get you anymore, or do you know what I'm saying, like that rubby place when you do start shifting and changing, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden people are like, who are you?
I that's
Not a
it's
judgment there.
no, 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 no.
No
I think
conclusions at all either, by the
no,
way.
no. I mean, I was just, but I mean, it is something that comes up. So it's a great question because I remember, because one of the other things we talk about, within Right Riches, and one of the greatest ways to build wealth and money and to start learning to have money is to create a 10% account. So you take 10% of everything you make and you put it away as an honoring of you. So I started doing that, and then you can do other things with that 10% account. You just don't have to keep it in money, cash. So I bought my first ring, and it was like, I just bought my first ring and I was wearing it around, and my family was giving me looks about it.
They're like, huh?
They're like, oh, are you queer? Like, what's?
Like, who are you?
I'm like, I'm sorry, I like money. Oops, my bad. Uh,
Nice, nice.
and
Thank
and
you.
so it is really kind of challenging in a way, because you have these people that you're like, I'm changing, I'm doing something different, I'm making, you're doing this stuff, and they're like, no, like, who are you? You've changed. And it's like, yes, I have changed. This is good. I like me better now. Um, so I think for tools that people are faced with this, I always go as like, okay, well, what is it that I really desire? Like, do I desire to live like my parents, or do I desire to have the life that they have? Because they're just making fun of me because it doesn't match their life. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's outside what they would consider acceptable or normal. It makes them uncomfortable. So I always look at it that way because I know when people are, and I also realized the other way. This is if you want to leap light years ahead of after taking the punches and not knowing what to do with it. I always
Yeah.
looked at it. I always looked at it as a congratulations that I was doing something, like I was getting closer to what I was really
Like if
asking
you're
for.
alienating people, then you must be on track.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and but I'm not doing the alienation. This isn't me like leaving
No,
people
no,
behind
no.
or separating.
You're being you. You're just celebrating new choices, basically.
Yeah. And so, like, every time someone would do that to me, I started celebrating it, being like, not out loud in their face, because, but I would just be like, oh, yes, like, okay, so I'm coming up against people like not liking this or not liking the change or not seeing the choice I made and how, or seeing the choice I made and seeing how different it is that it makes them uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, cool, I'm getting somewhere. How does it get any better than this?
Oh my goodness, that reminds me. I went to LA with my daughter's hockey team this last spring.
Uh
And
huh.
so I get to the rental car place and they seriously don't have a car for me. And I'd set it up like, weeks ahead, 9 o'clock on this one morning, and I have to be to LA by 3 or 4, and it's all structured, right? I know exactly what I'm
Hmm.
gonna do. I drive up and they're like, no, yeah, I got dropped off. So then they're like, no, we don't have any cars, but don't worry, we'll go get a car for you. Come back in a few hours. I'm like, doesn't really work for me because, I had it all structured. And then when I had driven in, there was this one really pretty convertible that just sort of was popping. It was like, $500 more a day than the one that I chose. And they go, well, we have that one if you want. And we won't really charge you much more because we don't have a car for you. I think it
Hmm.
was like instead of like way more, it was like $100 more for the whole trip to
Yeah.
have this beautiful convertible. And it was beautiful weather. It was like the spring in California. And I said, okay. And so I ended up with this beautiful white convertible and we just cruised up the coast. It was so beautiful. And it was interesting, but the families were just looking at me like, you know who are you? I remember that pretty clearly. Let me ask you another question. Um, you just come out of this kind of experience in Costa Rica and having some more consciousness tools and more consciousness information. How can we give ourselves the freedom to make new choices? Because old choices are so much easier to make.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point of view that you have the idea that old choices are easier to make. Because sometimes, like, you know what I mean? I'm not, I know, like, this
So
is
let's
like
bust
something that's out.
let's bust
No, but I mean, you have this idea that old choices are easier to make, but are you looking at where you're making different choices? Because most of the times, like, you just make, you make, you make like a different choice, but you don't even realize you made a different choice. You know what I mean? You're just like, you just make a choice. And
Oh,
so,
interesting.
you
So
know,
acknowledging sometimes when you are making new choices
yeah,
that,
because
that
I mean,
you're that you're on track, like giving yourself a pat on the back when you choose something that's a little bit different than other choices you've made.
you were just talking about getting the convertible and everything, and you're like, oh, well, normally I wouldn't choose this, but it was there and they didn't have a car for me anyways. Okay, so I guess I'll let myself have it. I got a deal on it. But it's like, that's a
Oh my
totally different
gosh, I
choice.
got a deal on it. I got a deal on it. I'm just gonna say it like 10 times. I got a deal on it.
Yeah.
How embedded is that in my culture of that
Yeah.
if I can't prove that I got a deal on something, then I'm not worth it. That was big.
Well, yeah, you're not worth it, or it's like, it's way too much money if you paid full price for it. But since they screwed up and they gave you a deal, now it's acceptable for you to have this really nice sporty rental car.
Right. But what if I just said, I'm choosing this and then let the $500
Yeah.
extra show up?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, but that would make you rich, and then it's like all of a sudden, that alienates you from people.
So let's give people a challenge. What would you like to challenge them? Let's give our listeners a challenge. What would,
Oh, a challenge?
yeah, like something to think about or do different now that they're
Well,
listening.
yeah, I think just like what different choices could you make that would make you more money in the future?
Hmm.
So it's like, some of it, for some of you, it might be the challenge that you have the money and you've just not been willing to spend it. For some of you, you might not even have the money. And so you might just like, well, what if you went and did something that, even if you didn't have the money, like we used to talk about going into a jewelry store and shopping for the things you would like to have and trying them on, you know, act like all these things that you wouldn't normally allow yourself to do because you say, oh, I don't have the money, like the car, you would like, oh, I don't have it, or I would never spend that much on something. But what I noticed that helped me so much change my points of views around money was actually choosing to go do the things. Like, I just got back today from an auction house. They have an open house and there's an auction coming up, and I like to buy things at auction. So I went and I looked, and I used to resist going to look around or even seeing the things, but now I just go and I look. And the funny thing was, I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, anything in this auction I could buy. Like,
Wow.
anything in this auction
You could.
at,
Like if you
I could
chose.
buy.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, some of
Right?
this stuff I might have had to move some funds around and stuff, but I, 99% sure I could have bought anything in that auction. And just like going into that place, knowing that from the point when I first go there, and I would be buying, like looking at like, okay, what's going to be a deal, and maybe I can afford this, maybe I can afford this
I
if it
get
doesn't
it.
go too
Even your
much.
whole energy was so down.
Yeah, exactly,
Instead of like, oh my gosh, this is my my buffet table. And
exactly.
really I've already paid because I've already put the money in my accounts. And so now I'm just like walking through the buffet table and I'm like, huh, would any of these things like to be in my life or would they make me money?
Yeah, but it was just like, and this was the first time I really got it going in there. And I was like, okay, well, I have all these choices, but crap, what is it that I really like to choose? Because I'm not eliminating things based on their price point or what I think they're going to sell for or whatever. I'm just like, okay, what is it that I truly desire to have? Or
Mm,
what is it that truly desires to be in my life? Because we have all these tools with access, and
right.
you can ask all these questions. And it's just what the freedom of just acknowledging, oh my gosh, like I could literally buy anything in here. I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a different choice that I have now available, and that just acknowledging it, because it was like,
Aw.
oh, but I walk in, you walk into the house a little bit different too, because you're
Did
like,
you end up buying
like,
anything?
the auction, it was just the open house. The auction actually is, it's like over this week, so it
So you
starts the
get to
first.
sort of have some dialogue
Yeah,
about with yourself.
yeah. Oh yeah, but it's always nice for me to go and touch the things and see them, because you see these pictures, and I don't know, me, pictures online, I'm like, okay, but I go there and I see stuff and I'm like, oh, it's like it's like a Facebook photo versus meeting the person,
That's a little
person.
different.
Oh yeah, it's a little different. You're like,
Oh, that's who you are.
yeah, exactly. And so you go and you see these things in the photo, you're like, but you see it in person, you're like, oh, I want this. And
Right.
then and it's also great because, I mean, even when I couldn't afford the things, I would go look and I'd be like, okay, this is really something I would love to have, like to
Yeah.
be able to have in my life. Like this
Right.
energy of like the nurturing it is to my body, or the way it just turns my body on, or the sense of peace I get with like having this stuff. I'm like, oh wow.
Oh, well, that was so awesome. And I know we went over 8 minutes, and it was just too good of an interview, and I was having too much fun. So it is what it is. Every interview has its own little thing. So tell me, Andrew Gardella, how can people reach you, find out more about you, learn from you, and follow you around the country or world?
Yeah, I'm all over the world. The easiest way to probably find me is andrewgardella.com or accessconsciousness.com/Andrew Gardella. And all my information's on there, and you can contact me, and my schedule's up there too, so you can find me that way.
Oh, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Lots of fun.